Well, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be hosting today's Trailblazer Tuesday with Nadine Lee. I'm Dr. Karen Philbrick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. MTI's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving the safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation systems. We do this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. And it is our pleasure to host our Trailblazer Tuesday event today. This series celebrates women leaders making an impact across mobility and across our nation. We celebrate people from the public and private sector as well as from academia. And I'm just so thrilled my friend could join us today. Nadine Lee is the Senior Strategic Advisor for the Transportation Initiative at the University of Pennsylvania, better known as TRIP. Immediately prior to that, she was the CEO of the DART system in the Dallas area, where she led a 13-city transit system for 5 years. But that's not all she's done. She was also the Chief of Staff at Los Angeles Metro, and prior to that, she was the Deputy Chief of Innovation Officer for that same system's Office of Extraordinary Innovation. She is an award-winning professional and leader, and I could go on, but I'm going to wrap up with just 2 quick highlights. She was awarded a Woman Who Moves the Nation award and distinction just this past few months from COMTA, the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. And in 2019, WTS named her the Woman of the Year. Nadine, thank you for joining us.
Of course, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, it's always a delight to talk to my dear friend, Dr. Karen Philbrick.
Thank you. I have decided to throw the entire script out the window and just have a conversation with you. Let's do it.
Okay. All right.
Why are you in transportation and how'd you get here?
That is a really funny story because I always have to tell people that I got into transportation sort of by accident because when I graduated from the School of Civil Engineering at the University of Missouri in Columbia, there actually weren't very many jobs available. We were in a recession at that time, and out of my class of, I think, 20 in civil engineering, there were only 3 of us that got jobs. Whoa. And I only had a choice between water engineering and highway engineering. And because I was lazy, I decided I would do transportation engineering. And because I also didn't think I could really do well at water engineering since I almost failed my hydrology class. So I decided to go into transportation engineering. And, it just seemed more interesting. But admittedly, I never liked driving. I was always embarrassed to tell people that I designed highways for a living. Oh. And yeah, I know it was weird, but when I got into transit, I started to tell people that I was a recovering highway engineer. And so I really, I got into public transportation because it just seemed like something that was good for people. And even though I didn't know it at the time, I think that sort of mission that we have in public transportation to serve people and provide opportunities and make connections really spoke to me. And I didn't necessarily consciously think about that at the time, but that's really what drew me in and what has kept me involved in public transportation specifically throughout my career.
So it's interesting because your story mirrors that of many, many other professionals. You sort of fell into it, fell in love, and stayed, but you're unique because you're an engineer and you were actually focused on that scholastically. So how did you transition from highways to transit?
So yeah, another interesting question. I really, I think when I was sort of like unhappy doing highway design, I was just struggling to figure out what I could do that I could be most proud of. And as I learned more about public transportation, I realized that I could be more intentional about the career I was pursuing. When you first start out, I think young people now are much more intentional. I think we've given them enough guidance so that they can be more intentional about how they pursue their different steps within their career. But I think, at that time I was just struggling, with self-doubt and hoping that I could just like not fail miserably, right? But when I realized that I could actually choose to go the public transportation route, then I was, it was more like, oh, I can do that. I can actually pursue a job that actually specifies that, that I want to go into public transportation. And so this was probably about, 7 years into my career or so. I decided that I was just going to go and apply for a bunch of jobs and I was going to apply for a variety of different positions. And then, when I actually found that I was going to get a lot of different offers, I started to say, well, okay, let me choose the ones where I could have this path in public transportation. And that was in the private sector at the time. And I didn't go into the public sector until a few years later, but really understanding that I had a choice, that was a huge moment for me, because I had never really been taught that I could choose my path. And so, I do tell people now, young people especially, it's really important for you to think through what you'd like to do, and what makes you feel good and what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, because you can intentionally follow that path, and there's nothing wrong with that. It may not always work out that way, but at least if you think about what you want in the future, you can move yourself that direction.
But still remain open to opportunities like you did.
Absolutely.
Very
Yeah.
important to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see that Joshua Shank is on. Thank you, Joshua, for being in my fan club. But Joshua,
Hey, Joshua.
and I often talked about this, and I really got this from Joshua. And he talks about doing things that you love, doing the things that are fun, and not necessarily programming your entire career to only follow a path that pursues one thing, right? Like, don't just pursue being a CEO in an organization. Pursue something that's really fun and makes you excited about what you do, and contributes, in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. When you can align your passion, it makes everything just flow better. But you've said a couple of things that I want to follow up on, of course. Mm-hmm. First is, I have to comment on you being such a proud supporter of the American Public Transportation Foundation Scholarship Fund. You are a CEO. When you made a contribution to that, you set the stage for really standing up for what you believed and taking action to follow through on your words. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. I've always been so impressed by that, by you closing the loop and taking the action and being intentional in how you communicate and show up every day. But you did mention imposter syndrome there just a little bit. So how did you work through that?
Well, let me just say that I think most people that I know have dealt with imposter syndrome at some level, at some stage of their career. Maybe they have overcome it. I for sure have not overcome it. I think I compensate for it. But imposter syndrome is like one of those things where I think if you're driven to do great things, you really always, you're always worried about failing, right? You're always worried about not living up to the expectation.
Yes.
And I think, grappling with that, I think one way to do it, one way to start doing it, if you haven't done this already, is to start writing down the things that you have accomplished, right? Go back to your resume and look at all the things that you actually talk about being good at and talk about doing well. Because a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to self-congratulate. And even though that feels really weird and awkward for most of us, and particularly for those of us who are Asian and culturally aren't allowed to do that, I think it's good for us to remind ourselves that we have accomplished a lot. A lot of times, and I'll just go back to an example of, when you have kind of the day-to-day ups and downs in life, and you just feel like, oh my gosh, I can never get ahead or whatever. Everybody focuses on that day-to-day or minute-by-minute progress or backtracking that we have, but nobody looks at day 1 through day 30 and looks at the actual progression of our knowledge, of our skill set, all the accomplishments that we've made between day 1 and day 30, or maybe it's day 1 and day 365, and we don't take a pause to be proud of those things. And I think it's really important for your self-esteem to really reflect on the things that you have accomplished and not dwell on just the negative things that have happened. And so I really try to encourage people to write those things down, because, and I do it too. I write it down. I used to not, but I decided I better practice what I preach. And I just think that, our jobs are so hard, particularly in transportation, and even more so in public transportation. Everybody is critical. Everybody hates us for whatever reason, because our services aren't good enough, or we broke down one day, and so it's very hard if you don't feel proud of your own work. There's nobody else who's going to be telling you how great your work is. So it's really important to recognize when you have accomplished things and to celebrate those accomplishments.
That is a very useful piece of actionable intelligence. And you're absolutely right. One of the other things I actually do for myself, which is similar, is I have an accolade file. I know it sounds silly, but if I need a little
Awesome.
pick me up, maybe I'll go back and read something that will help me reframe the situation. But the other thing you just shared with the participants today is how important it is to look at the history of recent success and not just the moment when you're gauging performance, and to make sure you don't let this spin out of control and you refer to the documented and objective success. That is
100%.
so important. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about that's cognitive reframing at its finest, actually. But you have a very interesting quote that's a part of your email signature. And I would like to read it directly and then ask what it means to you.
Okay.
So, may you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. It's an Apache blessing. Tell me more about that.
So I don't remember when I came across that quote. And I think the reason I like it is because it kind of speaks to nature, first of all, and the environment and protecting our environment. But it also speaks to just, I mean, how many times in a graduation have you heard people say, stop and smell the roses, right?
Yes.
And I'm getting kind of emotional here because I think it's such a beautiful quote, and it makes me think about all the things that we want to do to make the world a better place. And probably, I think in the midst of sometimes feeling like, there's a lot of people trying to destroy the world, it's sort of like, let's appreciate what we have and preserve it, right? I think it's, and the wish for everyone is that they enjoy, the quality of life that we all, I think, uphold and we all try to promote and create for others. And to me, in public transportation, that's really what we were trying to do, is to create an environment where transportation is so easy for people that they don't have to worry about it. And so it makes their life easier. Knowing the beauty all the days of your life, it's like wishing the most wonderful things for people and giving people, grace when things don't go perfectly. But then also saying, like if I have, if I'm happy in my life, I want you to have a happy life too. You don't have to have it the same way that I do. But I want you to enjoy the beauty of the world as much as I can, because you're free of sort of the stresses and the pressures. So what can I do to relieve those pressures? And so, like, wishing these for other people, wishing the beauty of the world on other people, I think is something that just, I feel like it speaks to who I am. And it's really, I think it's what we do in public transportation.
It is what we do. And you're so beautifully linking your mission with your personal drive and your personal passion and why it's so meaningful to you. And seriously, you got emotional. I've got goosebumps. That is such a beautiful blessing. And I just have to do a couple of comments on what you just said, because you have such nuggets of true wisdom in those words. You talked about impressing and being kind, how much kindness and stopping to see the beauty, how that matters, and quality of life matters. And you want that for everybody in whatever way that looks like for them. But what that really speaks to on a deeper level for your leadership is creating a culture of psychological safety, a culture where people feel they can actively contribute without fear of retribution or harm or making mistakes. They're free to give fully. That is a beautiful thing. And I bet your team misses you. Creating
I miss them too.
I bet you do. And then one last comment, you practice being kind and engaged and intentional and happy. And that is something that could be an emotional contagion in a very positive way. A leader sets the tone of an organization. The leader sets the tone of the family and the interactions. If they look to you and see you demonstrating that behavior, they're going to do it too and feel safe in doing so. You are amazing.
For sure.
Now, how do you...
Mm-hmm.
Please.
I was just going to say thank you for repeating back what I just said more eloquently than I said it myself.
I'm linking it to science, because you're talking about how you lead from the heart. And I don't think you've actually delved into the literature and know that you're like checkmarking every single high quality characteristic, Nadine. Seriously.
Thank you. And for those of you listening, you may not know this about Dr. Philbrick, but she is so good with the research and being able to repeat back research that probably would seem more obscure to the rest of us, that you are so well read and so knowledgeable. And I'm always so impressed at what you can quote.
You're embarrassing me, but thank you. So back to you. How did you control your stress? What did you do for you?
Oh, well, I think a lot of people know that I take ballet, and full disclosure, I'm a terrible ballet dancer. I'm still a beginner, and when you start as an adult, you just don't really have a real future in dance.
Girl.
But ballet is like, I was just telling somebody this morning that ballet is the one thing I can do that requires so much focus and concentration that I cannot think about anything else. And so if I needed to decompress from a hard day,
Mhm.
I would go to ballet class and I would forget about what was stressing me for that day. And so I don't dance as much as I should, but I do think that dance is where I will wave my freak flag better than anybody because it's like one of those things that it's a futile effort. I'm never going to be good at it, but I still love it. And I have teachers who love teaching adults specifically, and that's a really special thing because it is hard to teach adults because you have to be so careful. But I will say that all my teachers teach adults as though we do have a future, which is really, really nice.
Sister, I'm taking a tap dancing class and I'm horrible. So that's really funny.
Awesome.
That is so cool. But we
That's great. We can get together and have a little review.
only for the two of us. I don't want anybody to see
Okay.
that. Somebody submitted a really cool question I want to ask you, and I'm going to read it. And it is, you've led major transit initiatives, across multiple regions. Clearly, we've heard your experience in the public sector, the private sector, highways, transit. How have all of those experiences shaped your perspective on what it takes to deliver large-scale transportation projects successfully and how to lead diverse teams? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Mhm.
There are tons and tons of parallels between big transit initiatives, big transit projects, or just projects generally, um, and leadership generally, right?
Mhm.
I think it's important to sort of look at what, like the real sort of strategies around major project delivery, right? You know what your outcome is. Everybody knows what the outcome is, right? Delivering, this big infrastructure project on time, under budget or whatever, on budget, hopefully. And I think there's some elements to that or components of that that I think are very easily transferable to large organizations, even small organizations, and teams generally. First of all, understanding what outcomes you're trying to achieve. What problem are you trying to solve? The second thing is, what's the strategy to get there? And then the third thing is, what is everybody's role in delivering on that outcome? And I think when you're in an organization or if you're leading a diverse team, I think it's important to keep your focus on those desired outcomes, because there are lots of different paths to get there. And oftentimes the path that you follow is not necessarily the path that you control. But it's really important for people to understand that, if we're all aligned on the outcomes we're trying to achieve, we can get there together. And we can get through those interpersonal relationships or interpersonal conflicts that arise inevitably.
Mhm.
If you have a seemingly perfect team that's always doing the right thing, that's great. It's very rare. It takes a lot of work to get there if you even have it. And even if you have it, it takes a lot to maintain it. So it's really important for everyone to sort of remind themselves what we're trying to do together.
Mhm.
And yes, everybody has a role. Sometimes those roles pivot a little bit. Sometimes people contribute a little bit more than what their role is. And I think, making sure that, every person is not so insular
Mhm.
about their particular role, being open to ideas and suggestions. If everybody has the motivation to make something better collectively, I think that makes for a successful project and a successful team. And in my case, at DART, a successful organization.
Absolutely. So when you had tension among team members as you're trying to achieve this collective vision of success, how would you recommend dealing with that to mitigate the impact on the overall success?
Definitely side conversations, private conversations with the individuals who are having some challenges working
Mhm.
together. And then also having conversations with them together, right? Let's remind ourselves what we're here for. And you do have to really continue to maintain those relationships and those roles. If it seems like something cannot be overcome, sometimes you have to make a change, and that's a hard decision too. But I think setting expectations on how you want people to work together.
Mhm.
At Dart, with my leadership team, we had a leadership framework that talked about our operating norms and how we were going to work together as a team. What were the principles by which we would work together? Though that particular framework we used to hold each other accountable to, building the trust within the team. So that was really important. And it was important for us to sort of revisit that on occasion.
That's very interesting. I'm taking notes. I'm trying not to look down, but I'm writing things frantically and I can't read my handwriting. But with that framework of accountability and building trust that you just referenced, I'm hearing that and I'm wondering if that also allowed you to feel safer pointing out when people weren't adhering to the rules because you had something to focus on or to point to.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it did give us, we didn't call it a charter, right? Because nobody
Mhm.
signed anything, but it was like, in some cases, I think some teams have charters where they have an agreement, a contract with each other to work together and to hold each other accountable. A lot of times people don't actually use that to hold each other accountable, but I do think it's important to use it as much as possible. That's the reason it's there. That's why you spend the time to create that charter or that framework to begin with. And so if we're not going to follow it, why did we do all that work? Because it takes a tremendous amount of time to develop those norms, those operating norms, and those expectations of each other. And frankly, for an executive team, as a CEO, I felt it was really important to hold people accountable to the titles that they held and the authority that they held.
Mhm.
Because if I can't get the senior leaders or the chiefs all to do what they were supposed to do to begin with, I don't know how they would get their various direct reports to do the same. So holding everybody accountable was extraordinarily important. And, we all rise and fall as a team. And so if
Mhm.
there's a breakdown on the team, everybody suffers. And recognizing that really, I think, has a big impact on success ultimately of the effort and of the team.
Absolutely. Now, for our participants, if you have any questions that were not submitted to me previously, do feel free to drop it into the Q&A. I do see we have one. With the recent retirement of Phil Washington, how did he play a role in your career development? That's a great question, Trustee Rashidi Barnes. Take it
and
away.
and Rashidi probably could repeat this exact same answer for himself, I'm sure. So Phil Washington, of course, those of you who know him
Mm.
know him as just a phenomenal leader. I was very fortunate to have worked for him at RTD as well as at LA Metro. He was probably one of my biggest sponsors throughout my career. He wrote the letter that got me into leadership APTA. He helped coach me and nurture me and encourage me along the way. He was the one who was like, you really should think about being the CEO, a CEO. And now's a good time for you to apply. And even
Wow.
though I admittedly was a very reluctant CEO candidate, I think actually I told this story at Compto. He said at one time to me, and this was like when he asked me to be the chief of staff at LA Metro, he was like, Nadine, when people invest in your leadership development, you ought to do something with that investment. And there's nothing more than shaming, one of your mentees, into actually pursuing other positions. So, and I say that very facetiously. I mean, he obviously wasn't really shaming me, but I think what he was pointing out was, you have leadership potential, and you should really try to pursue those types of changes within the industry that you have in your mind. Like, why not try it? It's worth the risk. And so it was a huge honor to be asked to work with him at LA Metro. And then I tell people all the time, I'm partially, maybe not partially, but maybe the majority of my leadership style has come from exposure to him, and he's
Mhm.
still a mentor to me. I still call him when I need something, and I don't know how he does it. He always has the right thing to say at the right time, even when it's like hard, for me to hear it.
But just his simple words of encouragement, suggesting you could be a CEO, sounds like it laid the groundwork for opening that as an opportunity in your mind.
Yeah. I mean, but for his conversation with me, I may have just kind of settled in where I was and been comfortable for the rest of my career. But no, he actually encouraged me to take on the CEO role at Dart, And when I was at Dart, I got to do some of the most amazing things, try some of the most risky experiments as it related to leading an organization. And I think, by and large, I feel, really, really good and that we were successful in all of those things.
Absolutely. I've got another question and we only have 4 minutes, so I'm going to go fast.
Okay.
Have you, by the way, one side note about Phil Washington, who is a tremendous leader. He is one of the Mineta Leadership Fellows, where we have a video of him talking about his leadership styles and recommendations for success. When we send out the video of this webinar, we'll attach a link to that Mineta Leadership Fellow interview as well. Have you ever worked with anyone who purposely went into transportation, or do most of the people you've worked with find themselves in it? That is a great question.
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
Let me think about that. I don't know that I'm sure I have worked with people who have purposely gone into transportation, but I would say most of the people came to transportation from different walks of life. But that's one of the most beautiful things about what we do in transportation, right? Because I think there was a leadership APTA capstone project several years back now where they went out and just interviewed random people about whether or not they'd ever considered a career in transportation. And like the blank stares that they got were pretty incredible. Yeah, exactly. And so, it's one of those things where I think we don't promote ourselves enough as an industry. And that's partially because I think we don't always want to draw attention to ourselves, because we're so busy trying to solve all the other problems because we never have enough funding or enough people or enough expertise or whatever. But I mean, maybe we need to get out there and do some branding and promoting of the transportation industry because it's a great career. We do everything that everybody else does. We just have a different sort of discipline that we work on.
Absolutely, and you're 100% correct. And to the question posed by Rashidi Barnes, who's one of the Mineta Transportation Institute trustees, he's also the CEO of a transit system in California in the Bay Area. He was a former professional football player. So when we talk about the circuitous routes we've taken into transportation, we've got some stories. But Nadine, you have really talked about loneliness and how transportation is a connector and how at the heart of it, it's about people. And I think that's one of the most beautiful gifts we can give back as an industry. We know that people who are socially isolated can have physical health that's equivalent to those who smoke up to 15 cigarettes a day. That is how vital it is to have connectivity. I'm going to close out with just a couple of takeaway notes from you that have been so helpful. Be kind. That was one of the real hallmarks that stood out for me from you. Take a moment to say thank you and to appreciate what's been accomplished. Don't be afraid to document your own success so you can be your cheerleader if you're having a moment of darkness. Be intentional in your communications, be intentional in your actions, be intentional in how you show up every single day. And I just want to say that framework of accountability and building trust, I would like to dig deeper into that in the next conversation. But before we close it out, do you have 30 seconds of last recommendations for anybody you'd like to share?
Well, sure. I always have to take the opportunity.
I love
it. When I think about, especially young people in the industry and the things that I want them to know, especially women, I will just say, I want people to not be afraid to be who they are, right? That's the most important thing because there's something about you that makes you unique and special and allows you to contribute in the way that you do and will ultimately make you super successful because you're different from others. And so don't be afraid to be who you are. I always tell people, don't be afraid to wave your freak flag and wave it hard. The other thing is, making sure that you take risks, right? Sure, you might fail every now and then, you might trip and fall, but I mean, if that happens, just regroup quickly and move on. Don't lose any time because you can spend a lot of time wallowing in something that you felt was a failure that 20 years from now won't matter at all. And so try to understand, when something really matters and when it doesn't. Because shoot, I mean, I see people who fail miserably very publicly all the time and they always land somewhere too. And so, you're whatever you consider a failure. And by the way, everybody has a different definition of failure. Even if it's a failure in your mind, it probably isn't to somebody else. So don't worry about it. Just get up, dust yourself off and keep going. And then the last thing is, understand that every challenge that you face, you're going to learn something from it. And all of that education will add up to something later on. And 20 years from now or 30 years from now, when you're looking back on your career, like I do sometimes, you're going to be like, I don't know why I worried about that. You're going to be just fine. This is something that I struggle so hard because I wish that I could put my brain into other like young people's heads just so that they understand that emotionally you're going to recover and you're going to be fine, but having that confidence at the age of 25 or 30 is really hard to instill. It's just a hard thing to do. But I'm looking at all of the rock stars who are in the industry today and I'm thinking, wow, we're so much better off with them than we were with me 20 years ago. So, I hope that people will see that the path that they're on, it may be sinuous, but at the end of the day, they're going to get where they need to be.
Beautiful. I started this session with goosebumps from your opening comments, and I'm closing them with goosebumps too. Now we're 2 minutes over, but I'm going to take one more minute just to close it out. First, I'd like to draw your attention again to the fact we'll be sending out a recording of this event. And our next big event we invite you to join us at is September 9th in Washington, D.C., where it's the Mineta Forum on Transportation Policy and Leadership, where we'll be honoring a legacy of service through Norm Mineta and commemorating the events of 9/11. We hope you can join us. We will send more information about that event. But Nadine, I'm just going to close by saying thank you for being a graceful leader. I want to share one more time the Apache blessing, which is may you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. Thank you for socially modeling what it looks like to be intentional in the world of transportation. A woman who moves the nation, a WTS Woman of the Year. Thank you, Nadine. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Karen. So great to see you, and thanks for having me today.
You bet. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.